In this video, I'd like to talk to you about what are cognitive biases in negotiations. Now, at its very basis, a bias is simply our predisposition towards something. That is, we have an outsized effect based upon some external factor, prior information, prior knowledge, our mental disposition coming into the negotiation, the mental frame that we're using. Any of these things cause us to have a predisposition towards something, right? And the bias itself means that we can't process the information that we come in contact with accurately because of this prior influence or this outsized effect that this influence has on our ability to cognitively process information. Okay, and cognitive biases are generally subconscious. We don't realize that they are affecting our way of thinking or our thought process. Okay, so with that being said, I think it's important that I give you some examples of common cognitive biases to help you understand what it is. So to start with, in a negotiation, it is common to see a false or erroneous fixed pie assumption. That is, the negotiators automatically default towards a haggling style or competitive approach to the negotiation because they believe that the interests at stake are distributive in nature, and that is, they're fixed. They cannot be, the total value cannot be expanded through integrative approaches. So it leads to a competitive approach in the negotiation. That is, you're trying to grab more value than the other side rather than cooperatively create value for both parties. So an erroneous fixed pie, right? You believe it's distributive, but it's potentially not. Okay. False conflict. You see this oftentimes as a negative result, as a result of compatible interests. That is, people have similar or the same interests, but you perceive that there is a conflict there. So ultimately, parties commonly settle on an outcome that is worse for both of them than they otherwise could have achieved, simply because they perceive there to be a conflict of interest, or that the desired outcomes of the parties are some way differing, okay, when that is not true. All right. An irrational escalation of commitment, that is when you exert an irrational amount of effort, time, and sometimes focus too much on a specific course of action rather than changing course of actions, right? That is, you recognize that there could be advantages to a different course of action, but nonetheless you double down on a specific course of action, even though the rational decision would be to prefer the other course of action or the other option. It's closely related to concepts of sunk cost, right? You don't want to forego all you've put into going through this process or going down this road in the negotiation, so you continue down that road because you don't want to make everything that you've done less valuable or worthless in the negotiation, right? So it's irrational that you follow this path or road in the negotiation. Okay. Another common bias is overconfidence. Now, confidence is good in a negotiation, right? In terms of motivation, right? In terms of mental disposition, in terms of communication and how others perceive you. But overconfidence can cause you to ignore elements of the negotiation, right? That is, you believe that you have the ability to affect the negotiation more than you actually can, right? That is, so as a result of that, oftentimes you ignore other aspects of the negotiation that could be valuable to you, that you should comprehend or take into consideration as part of your decision making or the actions that you take. Okay, so that's the overconfidence bias. Egocentrism, and that is a tunnel vision, as you'll say, a focus on yourself and your own interests in the negotiation, right? So you're unable to empathize with the outside party, the other person. You're unable to recognize their point of view and thereby, understand and collaborate or come up with ways that meets their needs as well as yours. So it's very much a blockade to getting to an integrative situation in a negotiation. All right. Self-serving bias. This is where we tend to look for information that is more beneficial to us, right? But most notably, it is a tendency for us to attribute aspects of our behavior in a negotiation to the context, right? We acted this way because of the context of the negotiation. But we attribute aspects of the other party's behavior to their personality, right? So we are biased towards a self-serving or self-focused tendency in this regard. And again, we look for information that once again serves our interest and focus more heavily on that than all the actual interests at stake in all of the information relevant to the negotiation. Okay. An issue framing bias. In prior videos, we talked about mental frames and how you come into the negotiation. And basically it's a framework by which you perceive information, by which you come into contact with external information and then take that in to process it mentally, right? So to the extent that you come in with a prior frame, right, that leads to some predisposition, right, some mental model that you're bringing into the negotiation along with it, it's a bias, right? Because once again, it causes you to exclude other information that doesn't fit neatly within the frame that you're employing, okay? Information availability bias, okay, that is our tendency to focus on first the information available, right, or the most readily available information as being the most important, when oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes there's a deeper level of information there that you should search out and seek to interpret, and also how the information is presented to us. So more vivid, more colorful, more flamboyant the information, the more impactful as it hits you, right, the more import we put on it. But oftentimes that is not the most important information. Marketing depends heavily upon our information availability bias in making decisions, right? That's why oftentimes commercials or advertisements are what they are, right? It's how the information hits you as opposed to a true assessment of what information is most important. Winner's curse, that's our tendency to, once again, not grab enough value or perceive that we didn't grab enough value in the negotiation because the other side accepted our offer or our position too quickly. We believe we left value on the table. Whether that's true or not, once again, it is our tendency to once again perceive that if something is accepted too quickly, that value was left on the table. Okay, endowment effect, that is our tendency to, if we have it in our possession and we believe it's ours, we perceive that we own it or we've already accomplished something, we will work or fight harder to not lose it than we will to obtain it in the first place, right? We overvalue what we have, or we put too much emphasis or value on what we have because we already have it, right? So again, it can be a distortion as to how much effort you should put into any course of actions in terms of maintaining that interest. And then lastly, reactive devaluation. That is our tendency to simply think that the other side's the villain, the other side's the competition. If they propose a course of action, then that course of action must not be in our best interest. Okay, so with that being said, we should once again devalue or look at anything that they offer as skeptical, right? Because once again, it came from our enemy or the competition. So these are some common cognitive biases, and these are examples that, one, it's useful to understand these tendencies because once again, understanding biases is the first step to mitigating their effect. But once again, these various biases show you how, once again, there are frames out there, there are predispositions that cause us an inability to accurately process information in a negotiation.